For decades, millions of viewers believed they knew exactly who Rachael Ray was. She was the energetic television cook who made complicated meals look effortless and turned everyday kitchens into places of confidence rather than intimidation. But recently, something about Rachael Ray has made longtime fans uneasy. The woman who once seemed unstoppable is now speaking openly about a series of difficult moments that have shaken her life in ways few people expected. Behind the familiar smile and the famous voice lies a story that is far more complicated than the cheerful television personality most people remember. Before Rachael Ray became one of the most recognizable faces in American food television, there was nothing particularly glamorous about the path she was on. She never attended culinary school, never trained under famous chefs, and never expected to become a household name. In fact, she once joked in an interview with the New York Times that she was completely unqualified for any job she had ever held. It was not false modesty. Ray truly built her career in an unconventional way, relying more on instinct, personality, and practical experience than formal training. Her approach to cooking was radically different from many celebrity chefs of her generation. Instead of presenting elaborate gourmet dishes that required hours of preparation, Ray focused on simple meals that ordinary people could cook at home without stress. This philosophy became the foundation of her breakthrough concept. The idea that a full, satisfying meal could be prepared in half an hour. The concept resonated instantly with audiences who were juggling work, family responsibilities, and limited time in the kitchen. When Ray launched her cooking segments built around this idea, viewers immediately responded to her authenticity. She did not behave like a polished television chef delivering rehearsed instructions. Instead, she spoke casually, joked with the camera, and cooked the way many people actually cook at home. That relatability helped propel her into national fame when her cooking show began attracting a massive audience. Soon, her personality was appearing everywhere, on television, in bookstores, and across food magazines. The success of her cooking shows led to an even bigger opportunity. Ray began hosting her own daytime talk program, a show that blended celebrity interviews, cooking demonstrations, and lifestyle segments. Over the years, it became one of the most recognizable daytime programs on American television. For nearly 2 decades, viewers invited Rachael Ray into their homes every afternoon. Her energetic presence, distinctive husky voice, and straightforward personality made her one of the most trusted figures in the food industry. During that period, Ray built a media empire that few self-taught chefs had ever achieved. Her cookbooks sold millions of copies. Her television contracts expanded. Product lines bearing her name filled kitchen stores across the country. By the height of her career, her success had translated into an estimated fortune of around $100 million. In the world of television chefs, that placed her among the most financially successful personalities of her era. For many people watching from the outside, the story seemed almost perfect. A self-taught cook had transformed a simple idea into a global brand. Yet, the image of constant success hid a reality that was far more complicated. Long before the fame, long before the television cameras and best-selling cookbooks, Rachael Ray's life had already been shaped by challenges that most viewers never knew about. And those early struggles would quietly influence the person she would eventually become. Long before Rachael Ray became the confident television personality audiences recognize today, her childhood was shaped by a series of challenges that would leave a lasting mark on her life. Many fans recognized Ray immediately by her distinctive husky voice, a sound that had become one of the most recognizable voices in the world of television cooking. What most people never realize, however, is that the voice that helped define her career actually came from a painful medical struggle during her early years. As a child, Ray suffered from repeated bouts of croup, a respiratory infection that inflames the windpipe and voice box. While most children recover from the illness without long-term effects, Ray's case was different. The repeated infections damaged her vocal cords at a young age, leaving her with a permanently raspy tone. Even as she grew older, the condition continued to affect her. She often lost her voice completely after long work days, particularly during the years when she was filming television episodes back-to-back. At one point, the strain became so severe that she required surgery to remove a cyst from her vocal cords. The procedure helped, but the problem never completely disappeared. What audiences eventually came to recognize as a warm and recognizable television voice was actually the result of years of physical strain. Health issues were not the only difficulty Ray faced growing up. Her family life was far from peaceful. Her parents operated several restaurants over the years. And while the business exposed Ray to the world of food at an early age, it also created enormous financial and emotional pressure within the household. The stress of running multiple restaurants, moving between towns, and maintaining the family business slowly began to affect her parents' marriage. One night, the tension reached a frightening moment that Ray would never forget. During an argument fueled by exhaustion and emotional strain, her father took the family's handgun and walked into her mother's bedroom. In a deeply disturbing scene, he held the gun to his own head while Ray's mother and children watched in shock. According to later accounts, her mother woke up to find him standing there in a desperate emotional state. The children began crying while the adults struggled to calm the situation. It was a kind of moment that can leave permanent emotional scars on a family. Not long after that terrifying incident, Ray's parents separated. She was still young when the marriage ended, and although she has rarely spoken publicly about the details, she has acknowledged that her family experienced difficult periods during those years. Despite the separation, her father remained a part of her life in smaller ways. When Ray eventually moved to New York as a young woman pursuing work, he even gave her a small can of pepper spray for protection. That gift would later prove useful after she was mugged while living in Queens. For a child growing up in that environment, stability was never guaranteed. Ray had to adapt quickly to emotional shifts at home while navigating the ordinary struggles of childhood outside it. And unfortunately, school brought its own set of painful experiences that would further shape the way she saw herself and the world around her. While the tension at home was difficult enough, Rachael Ray also faced painful experiences once she stepped outside the house and into the classroom. School, which is supposed to be a place where children learn and grow, became one of the first environments where she felt painfully out of place. The moment that would stay with her for the rest of her life happened on what should have been an ordinary first day of school. That morning, Ray arrived carrying the lunch her grandfather had lovingly prepared for her, a sardine sandwich. In the home she grew up in, food was expressive and deeply tied to family traditions. Her grandfather, an Italian immigrant named Emmanuel, believed that good food was part of everyday life, and sardines were a perfectly normal ingredient in his kitchen. But in a typical American kindergarten classroom, the smell and appearance of the sandwich made Ray instantly stand out. Most of the other children had brought familiar lunches like peanut butter and jelly or ham and cheese on white bread. Ray's lunch looked and smelled completely different. Within minutes, the teasing began. Children pointed at her food, wrinkled their noses, and laughed. Some began calling her the Stinky Girl, a nickname that quickly spread around the classroom. What had started as a simple lunch prepared with love turned into a humiliating experience for a child who only wanted to fit in. Unfortunately, the sandwich was not the only thing that made Ray stand out that day. While many of the other students were wearing jeans and casual clothing, Ray had been dressed in a more traditional outfit. The difference made her feel even more isolated among the other children. In later interviews, she recalled returning home devastated and declaring that she never wanted to go back to school again. For a young child, that moment could have become a permanent source of insecurity. But the person who helped change the direction of that story was the same person who had packed the infamous sandwich, her grandfather. Instead of treating the situation as a tragedy, he responded with blunt honesty. When Ray began crying about being bullied, he challenged her to think differently about what had happened. He asked her simple questions. Did she still have her mind, her hands, her ability to think and learn? When she answered yes, he told her something she would remember for the rest of her life. He reminded her that what mattered was not what other children thought of her lunch or her clothes. What mattered was what she could do with her mind and her abilities. He told her that if she wanted to wear jeans the next day, she could. If she wanted to bring something else for lunch, that was fine, too. But she was not allowed to let other people decide who she was. It was a tough lesson delivered in a very direct way, but it worked. Ray later described that moment as one of the first times she learned to stop worrying about fitting in and start focusing on who she wanted to become. Ironically, the very thing that once made her stand out in school. Her unique relationship with food would later become the foundation of her entire career. Yet the man who gave her that confidence would not be in her life forever. One of the most heartbreaking losses of her childhood was still ahead, and it would leave an emotional gap that Ray carried with her for many years. Even after Rachael Ray built a wildly successful career and became one of the most recognizable personalities in food television, life continued to test her in ways that few viewers ever imagined. From the outside, it looked like she had achieved everything: a beloved television show, best-selling cookbooks, and a fortune that placed her among the wealthiest figures in the culinary entertainment world. Yet behind that success, a series of devastating personal losses would slowly reshape the way she lived her life. One of the earliest heartbreaks she carried into adulthood was the loss of her grandfather, Emmanuel. To Ray, he had been far more than just a family member. He was her mentor, her closest friend, and the person who first introduced her to the emotional power of cooking. Many of the values that guided her career, simplicity, generosity, and respect for food, came directly from the lessons he taught her while they cooked together. When he passed away while she was still young, the loss left a deep emotional scar. Ray would later admit that many of the recipes she prepares today still remind her of him. Cooking those dishes, she once said, feels like spending time with him again. Years later, after she had become a television star, Ray experienced another kind of loss that deeply affected her daily life. In the spring of the pandemic year, she and her husband, John Cusimano, said goodbye to their beloved dog, Isabeau, to many viewers. Isabeau was almost as familiar as Ray herself. The pit bull had appeared regularly on Ray's social media, and even occasionally on television broadcasts. For Ray and her husband, however, the dog was far more than a charming mascot. Isabeau had been part of their family for many years and had become a constant presence in their home. When Isabeau died, Ray shared an emotional message describing the final moments they spent together. She wrote that the dog had taught them more about unconditional love and empathy than they had ever expected to learn from an animal. During that time, Ray was already filming episodes of her television show from home due to unusual global circumstances, and Isabeau had often been the only audience watching her work. The idea that the dog would still appear in episodes filmed before her passing made the loss feel even more surreal. But the emotional blow from losing their dog was only the beginning of a much larger disaster. Later that same year, Ray and Cusimano experienced a terrifying event that nearly erased a major part of their lives. Their home in Lake Luzerne suddenly caught fire due to a buildup of creosote in the chimney. The blaze spread rapidly, and within a short period of time, the house was engulfed in flames. Ray later described the devastation in heartbreaking terms. The fire destroyed not only the structure of the home, but also decades of personal memories. Inside the house were 40 years' worth of notebooks, recipes, drawings, and creative ideas she collected throughout her career. Many of those materials represented the early stages of projects she had never yet shared with the world. Watching them disappear in a single night was almost impossible for her to process. Yet even after the fire, Ray forced herself to return to work quickly. In a later interview, she recalled that she resumed filming almost immediately after the disaster, joking that she had gone back to work wearing borrowed underwear because nearly everything she owned had been destroyed. It was a moment that revealed both her resilience and the emotional pressure she was quietly carrying. Unfortunately, the streak of bad luck did not end there. Not long after the fire, another disaster struck when her apartment in New York City suffered severe damage during a powerful storm. Flooding from a hurricane tore through the building, destroying walls, ceilings, and expensive equipment inside the home. Ray later described the destruction as if the apartment had simply melted. Dealing with the restoration of 2 destroyed homes at the same time would have been overwhelming for anyone. Yet Ray continued appearing on television, smiling and cooking as if nothing had happened. For viewers watching at home, the cheerful personality they had always known seemed unchanged. But privately, the accumulation of these tragedies was beginning to take a toll. And soon, fans would begin noticing that something about Rachael Ray seemed different. For most of her career, Rachael Ray had been known for her energy. Whether she was cooking a meal in under half an hour or interviewing guests on her daytime program, she always appeared quick, confident, and completely in control. Even when her personal life was going through difficult moments, she rarely let that struggle show on camera. But in recent years, longtime viewers began noticing subtle changes that sparked concern among her fans. After nearly 2 decades hosting her daytime talk show, Ray made a major decision that surprised many people. She chose to step away from the program after 17 years. For a host who had become a permanent presence in the afternoon television schedule, the departure marked the end of an era. Ray explained that she wanted to explore new creative projects and shift her focus toward other forms of media. Although the decision sounded optimistic, some viewers quietly wondered if there were deeper reasons behind the move. Soon after leaving the show, Ray launched a podcast where she spoke openly about life, work, and the challenges people face as they get older. The program offered a more personal glimpse into her thoughts, and fans appreciated hearing her speak candidly about experiences that had shaped her perspective.